expert panels right now. Congressional candidate from Arizona, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is a Middle East expert, and former naval intelligence officer and an overseer at Stanford Hoover Institute, John Jordan. Gentlemen, welcome and great to have you both with us.
Thank you.
So we have Iran enriching its nuclear facilities. We know they don't want the watchdogs there. Zuhdi, tell us also about its uptick now with Hezbollah, increased cross-border strikes there. So every way you look, Iran seems to be pulling the threads here without any fear of repercussions on the global stage.
Well, this is exactly what happens when the maximum pressure campaign of Secretary Pompeo and President Trump went away. And then you wonder why the Shia theocrats were fueling the Sunni theocrats of the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas for October 7, because ultimately their regional ambitions are to become the hegemonic power, to distract the West, to distract Israel with a war. It doesn't matter against who. This one was with the Hamas radicals. And as you see the activities in southern Lebanon with Hezbollah and with the Houthis and their branding, they've rebranded jihad. And now they've taken the billions that Biden released to not only fund Hamas, but to re-energize their nuclear program, which puts us more at threat than we've ever been.
It's frightening stuff. And then you have this trip, Vladimir Putin, Russia's President John, going to North Korea tomorrow, meeting with Kim Jong-un, 2-day trip there. And, you know, over at the G7 last week, while Biden was getting lost looking at, different parachutes there, they tried to say they were, increasing sanctions against Russia. Pick up on this thread here. And also, if you want to, Iran's nuclear capabilities.
Well, first of all, Putin is going to North Korea because he needs to strengthen his relationship with North Korea, because he needs 3 things from the North Koreans: parts for T-54 and T-62 tanks, artillery shells, and short-range missiles, so that he can stretch Ukrainian air defense network and deplete them of those very expensive European and American systems and grind them down. The Russians have shown no sign that they are really backing off of their maximalist objectives with regard to Ukraine. I had dinner with some pretty well-connected Russians last week who are pretty good at communicating whether or not the temperature in the Kremlin, and they're going full bore still. The Iranians are taking advantage of this. They know that they can enrich now because they're not likely to escalate now, especially with Hezbollah and world opinion and pressure being put on them by the United States. So the world's a far more dangerous place, Bianca, because of it.
Yes, and with the Middle East, a lot of developments there. In addition to the fighting, there's a lot of politics happening, Dr. Jasser. You know that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, quits. Now they are going to dissolve the war cabinet, calling it a kitchen cabinet. There's this pause in fighting during the day. It's not a ceasefire, but it is a pause, a tactical pause. So what is the next few weeks, months look like? As John just talked about, sort of this ongoing conflict in Ukraine seems to be never ending. Many folks are hoping the Middle East is not the same scenario.
Well, listen, make no mistake. Israel has a just war to wage and to finish. Hamas, if they wanted to end the war, could surrender, release the hostages, and end the time of conflict. And Israel has bent over backwards to minimize casualties and minimize the unfortunate result of war, as we saw when we went to Afghanistan to get al-Qaeda because of their attack on our soil. And this is what Israel went through on October 7 is 50 to 100 times what we went through in America. So this war will need to finish. They've been now giving pauses for humanitarian aid during the day. But this call from Biden for a ceasefire, et cetera, is just an abandonment of justice, an abandonment of the reality that Hamas should not be able to come back, and that ultimately the future of the Middle East will be a Palestinian rule without Hamas, and that ultimately their people will need to realize that they are victims of Hamas and not of Israel.
Yes, and as you said, the job is there, and Israel prepared to finish it and capable of doing just that. Wall Street Journal reporter, John, still being held in Russia. There's a date now set, Evan Gerskovich, June 26, behind closed doors. He's being accused of espionage, which obviously we know is trumped-up charges here. But Russia can use this as a play, like we saw Greiner and Victor Bout, that Russian arms dealer. But, for him, he faces 20 years in prison if convicted, and this is all happening behind closed doors. So how do you see that playing out for this reporter?
Well, this is the old spy versus spy game, if you ever read Mad Magazine as a kid. So this goes back, you remember Danilov in 1986, that happened, the American journalist was arrested. That was the last time this had happened. Now, in this case, this Wall Street Journal journalist has been moved from Moscow, from Russia's notorious Lefortovo prison to Yekaterinburg, which historically interesting was also the site of the murder of the Russian royal family, for his trial. Dmitry Peskov, Peskov said today there are discussions going on, but it needs to happen in complete informational silence. There are people the Russians want in exchange, and very much like Brittany Griner being taken into custody specifically to get Victor Bout out, the Russians have targeted somebody likely in a three-way trade with somebody that was convicted of murder in Germany that the Russians want out, Vadim Krasivsky. So look for that, but this game has happened before and it'll happen again, but they did this with the intention of specifically targeting somebody they want out.
Well, certainly a lot of stories that are of massive interest across the globe. I appreciate you guys breaking it down. Expert analysis, John Jordan, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Thank you both.
Thanks, Bianca.
Appreciate it.